Let me tell you something that the world ain't ready to hear, but you better sit down because this one right here, this is about a move so silent, so calm, so deeply rooted in history and vision, that by the time the world blinked, it was too late. The game had changed, the pieces were in motion, and the one who made that move, India, yes, India made a move so silent it echoed through every war room, every boardroom, and every situation room on the planet. C, everybody always expects a bang. They expect a war cry, a loud declaration, a press conference, a missile launch, or some flashy statement saying, "We're here now." But let me tell you something. The loudest players in the room are never the ones in control. The ones who control the board are the ones moving in silence, calculating steps, waiting patiently, and then, bam, they shift the entire game with a flick of their hand. That's what India did. The West, busy pointing fingers. China, caught up trying to expand influence. Pakistan, always barking louder than they can bite. But India sat still, watching, listening, building, and not building for today. Oh no, India was building for the next 50 years. They weren't trying to win the sprint. They were focused on the marathon. Now I know what you're thinking. What move, what silent shift, what quiet masterstroke flipped the global order without a single warning shot? I'll tell you, but you better brace yourself, because this ain't your regular political commentary. This is truth, raw and unfiltered. India didn't announce its rise, it prepared for it. Quietly, in labs, in classrooms, in underground bunkers, in ancient temples, in engineering campuses, in missile test facilities, in AI incubators, in quantum computing labs. India built the future while the world was distracted by the noise of now. While global superpowers were busy flexing muscles on social media and media wars, India was decoding DNA. While debates raged about who had more aircraft carriers, India was investing in drone swarms, laser weapons, anti-satellite tech, and space militarization. They didn't argue, they acted, and action done in silence. That's called precision. That's called purpose. This wasn't about showing power. This was about becoming power. And you don't become power by shouting about it. You do it by becoming indispensable. You do it by making yourself the engine room of the world's technology, the soul of the software economy, and the backbone of modern defense. You do it by being the one player nobody wants to admit they now depend on. Let's take a walk down that lane, shall we? Everyone laughed when India said they'd land on the moon. They chuckled when ISRO did it with a fraction of NASA as budget. But who's laughing now? They didn't just land. They innovated. India didn't come to copy. They came to disrupt. When the Chandrayaan-3 landed near the south pole of the moon, where no one had dared to land before, India told the world, "We don't need to follow your path. We build our own." But that wasn't the move. That was just the hint. You want to talk defense? Let's talk Akashin, a missile system that nobody thought India could perfect without help. But guess what? They did it alone, and not only did they perfect it, they sold it. You understand what that means? India ain't just protecting itself anymore. It's arming others. It's equipping allies. It's deciding who gets to defend what. That is power in its purest form, but still. Not the silent move I'm talking about. That move, the one that changed everything was psychological. It wasn't one missile. It wasn't one satellite. It wasn't a law or a speech or a vote at the UN. It was a doctrine of silence. India changed the rules of global engagement, not with weapons, but with restraint. They stopped reacting. They stopped explaining. They stopped seeking validation. And when a nation no longer seeks validation, it becomes the validator. That's the power move. You don't play the game anymore. You become the referee. You see, restraint is misunderstood in this world. The West calls it weakness. Enemies interpret it as fear. But real strength doesn't show off. It endures. It absorbs pressure without breaking. It waits, and then, when the time is right, it strikes. And that one strike changes everything. That's what India did. You think America didn't notice. You think Europe didn't raise an eyebrow. You think China didn't panic just a little when India signed defense pacts with Southeast Asian nations, launched its own AI military initiative, and deepened ties with Japan without making a fuss. But oh, the big moment came when India walked away from deals that weren't aligned with its vision. No drama, no insults, just a calm, clear no, thank you. That was the moment the world realized India ain't playing defense anymore. They're not just reacting. They're not content being part of alliances they didn't define. They're building their own asterisk circles of influence. And here's where it gets deep. This isn't just about missiles, tech, or territory. This is about civilizational resurgence. India isn't trying to mimic the West. India is bringing back something older, something deeper Dharma. That ancient code of balance, purpose, and power. It's not about domination. It's about rightful positioning, you see. While the world was racing toward consumerism, India was reawakening its soul. Yoga went global. Ayurveda became a billion-dollar industry. Sanskrit started showing up in Western academia. Indian philosophy began to infiltrate Silicon Valley boardrooms, meditation rooms in tech firms. That's India, baby, quiet, subtle, but everywhere. India didn't need to send warships. They sent culture. They didn't shout slogans. They let ancient chants echo through halls of global conferences. And guess what? People listened, and now they're following. But this move ain't just spiritual or technological. It's strategic. You know how you win a chess game, not by chasing the king. You win by positioning your pieces so smartly, so silently, that when the enemy realizes what's happening, it's already checkmate. India placed its pieces in the Middle East by staying neutral but firm, in Africa by investing instead of colonizing, in Southeast Asia by aligning interests instead of dictating terms, in Latin America by exporting tech instead of ideology. And everywhere they went, they didn't shout, "We're here." They whispered, "We understand." And trust me, that whisper traveled louder than any roar, even in the digital battlefield, where algorithms decide elections and data is the new oil. India made a move nobody saw coming. Data localization laws, indigenous 5G networks, quantum encryption projects, blockchain-based governance. They didn't just use the internet, they began to shape it. And here's the kicker. India did all this while absorbing punches. Border skirmishes, propaganda wars, economic boycotts, and what did they do? Nothing. On the surface, but beneath it all they were digging deep, strengthening, layering, reinforcing, until the foundation was so strong that no amount of noise could shake them. That's the silent move. That's the doctrine. Resilience without retaliation. Progress without announcement. Sovereignty without aggression. And now the world is waking up. Suddenly, G20 some. It's don't feel complete without India leading. BRICS. India is the balancing force. Quad. India is the pivot. And in every global conversation, there's an unspoken question. What does India think? That question alone is the proof. Because when your opinion becomes essential to global decision making, you've arrived. And still, India doesn't flaunt it. They don't demand a seat. They pull up their own chair, because they understand something the world forgot. Power isn't about being feared. It's about being followed without asking. You want to know why that move worked. Because it wasn't just a geopolitical strategy, it was a mindset shift. India stopped playing defense. It stopped begging for inclusion. It stopped reacting to disrespect. And the moment you stop giving power to other people's opinions, You take back your own. That's what this is all about. This ain't just India's story. It's your story. How many of us have been told to shout, to fight, to demand our place at the table? But what if I told you? Your real power comes from silent preparation, from quiet consistency, from unshakable dignity. That's what India embodied, not just a nation rising, but a people choosing elevation over explanation, choosing mastery over validation, choosing legacy over noise. So now, when the world looks confused, wondering when this shift happened, they'll scroll back through headlines and realize they missed it because it wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, it wasn't trending. It was silent, it was steady, and now it's irreversible. India didn't arrive, India asterisk became. Asterisk, and that right there. That's the move that changed asterisk everything. Asterisk, when the world wasn't watching, when the noise of war, inflation, and digital circus clouded every screen, something began to shift deep within the engine room of global finance. Beneath the radar, under layers of strategic silence, India was laying the foundation for a move that would not only shock economic superpowers, but also liberate entire continents from the invisible chains they didn't even know they were bound by. It was more than a financial system, it was a statement, a silent revolution. India created an alternative to SWIFT and dollar dependence, empowering new global financial autonomy, and with that, it marked the birth of India's assertive military doctrine backed by innovation. You see, for decades, the SWIFT system stood as a silent weapon in the West's arsenal, wrapped in the neutral, sounding name of Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It was anything but neutral. It was a financial chokehold, an economic trigger, a system where if you dared to step out of line, be it geopolitically, ideologically, or strategically, they could unplug your nation from the global economic lifeline. Banks would freeze, trade would stop, currencies would collapse. It was quiet warfare, and it worked without firing a single bullet. Nations bowed, economies bent, and the dollar sat at the top, like a king whose rule was never questioned. Until India whispered, "Not anymore." India watched how sanctions became weapons, watched how the global south remained financially vulnerable, watched how countries were punished not for war crimes, but for refusing to follow Western mandates. And while the world ranted, tweeted, and protested, India built quietly, patiently, relentlessly. They didn't scream revolution, they engineered resilience. And at the center of it all was the ambition to create a new payment infrastructure, one that didn't rely on Western goodwill, one that didn't report to Brussels, Washington, or London. A system born from necessity, forged in strategy, and refined by innovation. That was the silent move, one that slipped under the radar until it was too deeply entrenched to be ignored. While others were focused on expanding nuclear arsenals and aircraft fleets, India expanded its fintech reach. You thought UPI was just for domestic convenience. Wrong. Unified Payments Interface was the prototype for something far bigger. It wasn't just about QR codes and smartphones. It was a national experiment on real-time financial integration, scaled to over 1 billion people. Once perfected, India didn't just keep it within borders. They offered it to the world. Bilateral agreements were signed. India began integrating UPI-like frameworks with nations across Asia, Africa, and even parts of Europe. Digital public infrastructure turned into diplomatic currency. Where dollars once dictated trade, India now offered a new deal: transparency, trust, technology. You didn't need to beg for financial inclusion anymore. India handed it to you, encrypted, secure, fast, and sovereign. But the real masterstroke, linking this system to a sovereign digital currency, not the Western-style surveillance-driven CBDCs, but one rooted in decentralization, powered by quantum, resistant encryption, and interoperable across multiple nations. It wasn't just an alternative to SWIFT, it was an entirely new model of economic engagement, and the world started to notice. African nations, tired of Western debt traps, leaned in. Central Asian republics, wary of being squeezed between China and NATO, opened doors. ASEAN members, quietly navigating tensions, began experimenting with rupee settlements. Even oil-producing countries, once chained to the petrodollar, started exploring what it meant to invoice in rupees, or even in gold, backed digital instruments pegged to India's trade indexes. This wasn't just economics, this was war, fought with code, not cannons. It was military doctrine without uniforms. By creating a system that couldn't be sanctioned, couldn't be frozen, and couldn't be dictated by foreign parliaments, India created the ultimate defense layer, financial sovereignty. And that's when it became clear. India wasn't preparing for yesterday's wars. It was rewriting the doctrine for tomorrow's battlefield. Every missile, every drone, every satellite, every AI-based command chain needs funding. Needs fast, traceable, untouchable capital movement. If your military relies on a banking network that can be shut off, you don't have a military. You have a liability. India understood that, and that's why the alternative to SWIFT wasn't just economic. It was strategic defense policy. Let's talk about the military doctrine this move birthed. India's previous military doctrine had always been defensive, reactionary. It relied on diplomacy, on traditional alliances, on conventional deterrence. But after years of border skirmishes, digital espionage, and economic coercion, India realized something crucial. Defense isn't about waiting, it's about readiness. And readiness isn't just boots and bullets. It's code, capital, and credibility. This new doctrine understood that wars will be fought not just on land, sea, and air, but in ledgers, in servers, in data centers. The next blockade won't happen on a sea route, it'll happen on a payment route. And when India built its own system, it ensured that no external force could blockade its economy, halt its military logistics, or disrupt its technological flow. But it didn't stop there. India's new financial infrastructure was infused with military-grade protection, real-time threat detection, quantum communication channels, indigenous chipsets, and blockchain-based audit trails. Every transaction, whether civilian or military, was shielded by layers that even the most advanced adversaries couldn't breach. In essence, India had done something profound. It militarized its financial system without making it aggressive. It was assertive, not provocative. It was resilient, not reckless, and that balance, that calm, composed, unshakable posture, became the face of a new India. One that didn't shout, didn't panic, and didn't seek approval. And just like that, other nations started following. BRICS started taking notes. Talks of a BRICS currency gained traction, but India's model offered something more realistic. Interlinked national currencies backed by interoperable platforms. Not one new global coin, but many sovereign tools cooperating without coercion. India offered the tech, the blueprint, the protocol, and soon nations started building their own versions, plugged into India's vision, not Washington's dominance. You want to know how deep this move went? Private global corporations began adjusting. Banks started integrating API from Indian fintech. Insurance companies started using Indian risk models. Investment funds began looking at the rupee not as exotic, but as essential. And just like that, India wasn't reacting to the financial order. It was writing the new one, and it happened without parades, without protests, without proclamations. It happened in code, in silent rooms, in think tanks, in forgotten buildings in Pune, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, where developers wrote the future while the world slept on the past. And behind it all was a mindset, a realization that in this new age, sovereignty doesn't come from tanks, it comes from systems. And India, by building those systems, declared a new kind of independence. Not the one in 1947, but one far more dangerous to global hierarchies. The independence to transact, to trade, to defend, to exist without permission. This move required global trust, because the real currency of the future is trust. And who do nations trust? The ones who don't spy on them, the ones who don't sanction them, the ones who don't destabilize their elections. India didn't just offer platforms, it offered principles, and principles, in a world starving for integrity, are worth more than any coin. The West didn't see it coming. They thought India would always be the software back office, the call center of the world, but India was done taking calls. It was now writing protocols, writing code not just for apps, but for autonomy. And here's the irony. The very silence that made the West ignore India is the same silence that made India succeed. Because you can't fight what you can't see coming, and you can't copy what you don't understand. India didn't just challenge the petrodollar, it created a blueprint for every nation that's ever been told they're too small, too late, or too dependent to change the rules. India didn't just rewrite the economic playbook, it gave it away to those ready to play a different game. And with that, a new kind of war doctrine was born, not one of invasion, but of insulation, not one of retaliation, but of redirection, not one of loud dominance, but of silent defiance. It didn't need missiles. It needed memory chips. It didn't need allies. It needed alignment. And when the financial system becomes your shield, your soldiers don't march. They code. Your tanks don't roll. They transact, and your war cry. That's a silent signature on a sovereign network that no foreign power can ever touch.